Hello class, we're going to continue and I think finish our set of lessons on evolution. In the last lesson we talked about the ideas about the origin of life. And I want to stress again that whereas evolution is at the level of a theory, remember theory means explanation, and evolution is essentially universally accepted among scientists. But for the origins of life, there is no standard, universally accepted explanation. Just wanted to stress that. This lesson I'm entitling Luca to Lucy to Luke. And as we'll go, you'll see what I mean by each of these names. But first, let's begin with Luca. So while the question of how did life begin is a mystery, or is not totally understood, all the evidence points to something called Luca, the last universal common ancestor. That is, look around you. You see life everywhere. So even if we do not have a good explanation for how life started, we can at least look back to what the first life form must have looked like, what must have been its characteristics. On the screen, you can see a picture of Luca along with the Godfather. Of course, this is just for funds that Luca Brasi was one of the henchmen for the Godfather. If we look at what scientists think are the basic features of Luca, this last universal common ancestor, it probably didn't look so much like the Godfather's henchman, probably looked a little bit more like this, that it was a single-cell organism like modern bacteria, probably had a cell wall or at least a lipid membrane exterior, utilized DNA or RNA as genetic material, utilizing the universal genetic code based on the 4 bases AGCT. It must have had a number of key enzymes that would replicate DNA and express DNA. Those would be DNA polymerase, ligase, topoisomerase. It probably used RNA as an intermediary along with another enzyme called RNA polymerase. It no doubt employed what is called the central dogma of molecular biology. That is, DNA stores genetic information. RNA is an intermediary molecule which helps with the translation of the stored genetic information into a structure of a protein. And then you have proteins, with also tRNA, transfer RNA, being intermediary molecules. And the proteins that Luca would have made would have involved the 20 common amino acids with possibly a few exceptions. Adenosine triphosphate, something called ATP, would have no doubt have been used as an energy molecule by Luca. Luca would have needed a few hundred enzymes or proteins in order to catalyze key metabolic reactions. There would have been relatively low sodium ion concentration inside the cell and relatively high potassium ion concentration in the cell, along with key transport systems. And Luca would have divided by mitosis. So scientists believe that this would have been a general description of what Luca would have been like. That is, that first cell that was developed and that then evolved into all the domains of life that we know now, the bacteria, the archaea, eukaryota, including ourselves up in the upper right-hand corner of this phylogenetic tree. So it must have started with Luca. Now, you remember at one point we said that the majority of species that at one time existed on Earth no longer exist, and that's because the species die out. So it's very unlikely that Luca still persists and hangs around. So we know that even our friend Luca Brasi met his demise and became extinct. Now, look very carefully in this photo. You'll see that there were causes of Luca's demise. He wasn't paying attention at the right time, and someone snuck up on him. Well, this gets to the notion that all life forms can be subject to extinction due to environmental factors. And in fact, there have been some major episodes of extinction of life forms on planet Earth. This slide shows the number of families, and it would be related to the number of species on planet Earth over the last 600 million years. And the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indicate major episodes of extinction. If you look at number 3, for example, number 3 is called the Permian extinction, where over 80% of the existing species disappeared from the face of the Earth must have been due to some significant climate change or asteroids or volcanoes. The dip at 5 is called the Cretaceous extinction, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the next slide, because we think we have some evidence for what caused the Cretaceous extinction. The Cretaceous extinction also coincided with the extinction of dinosaurs. The fossil record shows that dinosaurs became extinct about 66 million years ago, and there's evidence of a major impact crater, what is known as the Chicxulub impact crater, which happened about 66 million years ago, where a large asteroid, an asteroid that was about 10 kilometers in diameter, that's about 6 miles in diameter, struck the Earth in a region that is now off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, of course, there may have been movements of land masses through plate tectonic shifts since that time, but this is where there's evidence of the impact crater. And it created a crater that is about 180 kilometers in diameter, about 110 miles in diameter. So a 10-kilometer asteroid produced a crater much larger, 180 kilometers in diameter. So there's evidence that the Chicxulub crater struck the Earth about 66 million years ago, which is almost exactly the same time as that fossil record shows the extinction of the dinosaurs. Interestingly, Chicxulub is a Maya word for tail of the devil. Force of the impact of the Chicxulub asteroid is thought to have been 2 million times as powerful as the most powerful atomic bomb that has been exploded by man, 2 million times as powerful, and 400 times as powerful as what is estimated to be the largest volcanic eruption ever to happen on planet Earth. And this impact caused mega tsunamis throughout the world, wildfires, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, acid rain, dust particles spewed into the air, which blocked the transmission of sunlight for as much as 2 decades. Now, can you imagine what this would have done to photosynthesis, to plant life, to the food chain? And so as a consequence of this, it's believed that this is the major reason for this extinction event. There may have been more than one asteroid, that's a debatable point, but at least this is one for which there is a great deal of evidence. Now, where was man at this time? So the dinosaurs became extinct about 66 million years ago. The first hominids, that is, mammals that walked upright like us, appeared about 7 million years ago. So actually there's no overlap between when dinosaurs walked the earth and when humans walked the earth, despite what you see in movies and some cartoons. So the first man-like hominids appeared about 7 million years ago. On the left in this slide is shown a plot of various human ancestors, where they lived and at what time frame. And this plot goes back to about 2 million years, because the first members of our own genus, Homo, have believed to have appeared about 2 to maybe 2.5 million years ago. And in this graph, you can see that scientists first believe that the genus Homo, our ancestors, first appeared in Africa and then spread to Asia and Europe. And they became separate species such as Homo erectus. We have Homo ancestor, Homo rhendensis, and then Neanderthals, what is called Neanderthal man, before the appearance of Homo sapiens, our own species. So you see that the first Homo sapiens were believed to have arisen about 200,000 years ago in Africa and then spread to the other continents, Europe, Asia, and the Americas. And it's interesting to note that there's no evidence for the existence of Homo sapiens in the Americas or any of the other Homo species until about 50 to 100,000 years ago. Also of interest is that Homo sapiens and Neanderthal man coexisted at one time. The other species in the genus Homo were extinct by that time, but Neanderthal man and Homo sapiens coexisted, especially in Europe, and were believed to have intermingled. And in fact, those of us, like myself, whose ancestry comes from Europe, are believed to have 1 to 2% of our chromosomes having characteristics of Neanderthal chromosomes. And of course, both species were in the genus Homo, so they had a great deal of similarity. To the right on this slide is shown a skeleton of Lucy. So Lucy is not part of the genus Homo. It's not a member of our immediate family, but it is an ancestor in the genus Australopithecus. And the reason why there's a lot of interest, or there has been interest in Lucy, is, as you can see, it's a fairly intact skeleton. And it was discovered in Africa in 1974. Lucy was believed to have lived, from isotope dating and that sort of thing, was believed to have lived about 3 to 3.5 million years ago. So on our graph to the left, that would have been far below where we have any entries in the graph to the left. So Lucy was a member of another hominid family who lived before our own family of Homo. Now, the reason she's called Lucy is because when the scientists discovered the skeleton, the song that was playing on their radio was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles. The bottom right of this slide shows the skeletons of both Lucy, the one on the left, and on the right you have skulls of 2 Homo sapiens. And in the middle you have other of our ancestors, Homo habilis, Homo erectus. As you can see, Lucy's skeleton was much smaller and was a shorter species than Homo sapiens. And the other skeletons, you can imagine that they must have been of intermediate stature. Now, in the news, and in fact just in the spring of 2015, you may have seen news stories about the Altamira Man. Now, this is another skeleton that has been studied. It's actually was found 10 or 20 years ago, but recently DNA has been isolated from this skeleton. Now, this turns out to be a fossil or skeleton of Neanderthal man, and it is believed that this skeleton is 170 years old. What is exciting about it is that the DNA is thought to be of the sufficient quality that it might potentially enable scientists to do chromosome mapping and DNA analysis, whereas other fossils have yielded DNA samples that are even older, as old as 400,000 years old for hominids. This is the most intact DNA sample that has been isolated, so that's why there's a lot of excitement about Altamira Man. Now, we're getting close to the end, so it's time for this little quiz. Which of these skeletons do you think is Homo sapiens? And I'll give you a few seconds, and you can write down one and see if you got it right. Okay. Well, if you said 5, that's correct. The first is a gorilla. The second is Lucy. The third, Homo erectus. Fourth, Neanderthal man. And then the fifth is Homo sapiens. That's us. And then the sixth is yet a different species in Homo. Notice that for Homo sapiens, you can distinguish a Homo sapiens skeleton because the others have a thicker brow ridge, and Homo sapiens have a sort of taller forehead or wider forehead. Now, the question is, if species in the family Homo have evolved to this extent in the last 100, 200, 300,000 years, where are we going to be in another few 100,000 years? Will we have evolved to have Jedi powers? We'll see. Now, I know what you're thinking. A true Star Wars fan knows that Star Wars occurred a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So if you think science is confusing, think about that. The movies are confusing because Star Wars was both in the past and in the future. But nevertheless, assuming that this is all a story and allegory, The question is, how is man going to evolve? And I guess even more importantly, are we going to evolve to be the good Jedi or the bad Jedi? Okay, so this ends our lessons on evolution. Time to pause for a quick break.